Hey guys, Latios here. I'm back with another video. This is a review for Greatest Raphael Ov.HXt plus dash. It's a pretty big name. I wanted to do this review because this Beyblade really surprised me. I hoped it was gonna be good, but it's really good, and I just really wanted to make a review for it. I'll also be making a review for Ultimate Valkyrie because that releases in a few days. Today is, I believe, the 9th, and it's supposed to come out in Japan on the 11th. I already pre-ordered it, so hopefully it can be here by like the 14th or something. Since I had to pay for extra like faster shipping from Japan. But with all that said, like I said, this Beyblade really surprised me, and I just really wanted to make a review for it. Um, First, let's just talk about its looks. It's just got a very interesting six-pointed attack ring or layer, and as you can see, they do, stick out pretty well. But we'll get to that when we talk about the actual parts. For right now, just looks wise, it's just a beautiful Beyblade. It represents the Archangel Raphael, and I just love its color scheme, like the reds and the blacks and the gold and the whites. They all work so well. Um, I love how over here on the sides it looks like wings. And this here kind of like not necessarily a crown, but like just light reflecting in a way. So it's really cool. I love how there's a little bit of gold here on the sides, and it's always up in upper mode, not lower mode, mostly due to how the the layer is and the ring itself is the disc itself. So as you can see, it's pretty circular for the most part, but again, we'll get to that a little bit later. And then we got the driver, which again we'll talk about a little bit later. First though, in terms of looks, like I said, its looks and color scheme is fantastic. There's just something very retro about its look, and it's just so well done. Um, and I just love how like the color matches, like even here in the bottom, like it's a little detail that you won't notice. This black, the black ring around the gold driver, so that's really cool. Um, the metal itself, the silver disc, it's the normal color, but it matches with the overall aesthetic of it. So everything for this Beyblade just matches, and it's just so well detailed. Um, and even the color schemes, they look a little strange for the most part, in the sense like, how does this reflect all of this, but it works. um Greatest Raphael does make me think of a little bit of Drasil from the original Beyblade series, and also Spin Dragoon, like the original Dragoon. So yeah, overall, I also love, and like how I said in my unboxing video, you can see it over here. It has this little glittery stuff embedded into the plastic, but it's not just in the translucent parts, it's everywhere for the most part. You can see it good right over here, but we'll show that a little bit better when we're looking at the parts individually. So let's just dismantle him, and let's talk about each part. I'm gonna be doing this video a little bit different. I think I might have said this earlier, but I'll be adding video of its performance while I'm talking about certain aspects about it in battle. But so we have a dash driver, and I just dropped it. So we have a dash driver, so which is really good. And then we have that gold color, which you can see a little bit there, the little glitter particles right here. And this is that black ring on the driver that I talked about. So high extend plus dash is a little bit taller than most other drivers. For example, I just have this wafer here next to me. So here it is. So right away you can see that this Beyblade is going to be a little bit taller than your average Beyblade, mostly because of this driver. Height doesn't really make too much of a difference in Burst, as it did in like the Metal Saga, but it's still really cool to have this. Dynamite does play a little bit around with the height, or in this case for Hasbro only people, QuadDrive, because of how the layers and the discs go. You know, you have the high mode and the low mode, so it plays around a little bit with the heights, but not as much as the Metal Saga did, and it's only recently as well. For the most part, everything else before was the generic height. So overall, you can see the little glittery effect over there. But let's talk about this driver tip. So this driver tip has 3 modes. It's got a stamina, defense, and attack mode. Greatest Raphael as a whole is a balance type Beyblade, and it is a fantastic balance type Beyblade. But we'll get to that in a bit. So the first mode it comes in is a sharp mode, which, as you can see right over there, it's got a very pointy tip with a little bit of a slope going towards it. This is it basically in its stamina mode for the driver itself. So when it's in stamina mode, I had noticed that it tends to use the 3 protrusions on its layer to basically, you know, reflect attack, which is really cool. But it also ends up having an issue that I had noticed before. If Greatest Raphael is in a stamina mode, it's going to be losing a little bit of a balance when the bear claw gimmick starts to raise up. So with that, it kind of can be a disadvantage in keeping it in stamina mode, because if a Beyblade is hitting it and it starts raising its claws, then it's going to definitely get unbalanced. The good thing though is if it's at a good enough launch with the tip still down for the most part, or at a good angle, it will come back up. So it's not something that you really need to worry too much about. We'll get into that when we talk about the Beyblade as a whole, but just keep in mind just keep in mind that keeping this Beyblade in stamina mode, while it can be good, it can cause some scary moments for sure. So to change mode, all you have to do is just lift up this part here. As you can see, it's just a little lifting up mechanism, and then you just turn it and drop it. So right now it's kind of like a semi-whole flat. As you can see, there is a slight tip there. This is very reminiscent of some of the Spriggan tips, but just with no rubber, and that tip is barely pointing. So you can even somewhat call this an attack tip or a balance tip, but it's supposed to be like a defense tip, But what I noticed with this is that there are moments where this will make the Beyblade go around, kind of like an attack type, which is pretty cool. But because this little tip is so barely out, it's barely gonna give it any extra stamina, and it's barely gonna give it any extra grip on the stadium itself. So keep that in mind. It's not the best semi-whole flat tip. I don't really remember the actual name for that. I'm just saying that term. But it can be good. I do prefer it a little bit over the actual whole flat style tip, because it ends up having just a tiny little bit more control than the full-on whole flat mode. And that helps with the Beyblade keeping it in balance a little bit more. In terms of Greatest Raphael, this actual tip option, it basically, how can I say it? I would say that this might be the best tip because it gives it a little bit more grip on the stadium, but it also makes Greatest Raphael as a whole a little bit more defensive. So this can help when it's starting to fall over, and then it'll like help keep it a little bit more balanced to stay up, because even though this tip is so small, it can help when it's literally touching the stadium floor. So it can help in that way in keeping it a little bit more defensive by giving it some attack and some support for when it starts to be hit. So I do think this is the best tip for him. In terms of him being in a defense mode, that is a little bit better as well. In a defensive mode, like I said with the stamina mode, when it starts spinning, the bear claw thing does start to go up. And if it's in a defensive mode, it's gonna keep getting hit, but then its disc helps it protect it a lot more. We'll get to the disc in a little bit, but it helps protect it a little bit more. But then it ends up, as the claws go up, he ends up gaining his balance again, and then he just stays mostly center for the most part. So this helps in keeping up with the attack momentum and also with the actual stamina and defense that he needs. Again, it's not too much of a defense tip. Maybe you can count just because of how circular and wide it is as a whole. You can say it's a defensive tip, which as a whole, not just looking at the tip, but the whole function of this driver to like how it's shaped is also wide, which is really good for defensive stuff as well, which in turn does help the actual Greatest Raphael layer. Now, if we go into an attack mode, we have to literally just lift it up again and turn it, and then it becomes a little bit taller too, way much more than it was before, and you can even see that little gap there. So this height difference does help it a little bit, but it's kind of a little bit wide. As you can see, it's a wide whole flat style tip. This causes the Beyblade to literally glide around the stadium. It's a little bit hard to control it. Lighter, softer launchers is better for this. And in terms of how it reacts with Greatest Raphael, it does make its attacks so much more stronger, especially because at this point it's just straight out attacking. But because of that, it does also sacrifice the other two elements, which is the balance and the stamina as well. So it is good for attacking using Greatest Raphael, but just keep in mind smaller launchers are better, but because those smaller, lighter launches, you're not gonna have enough stamina to really keep this Beyblade up for the most part. And as I'm sure you guys are watching these little clips, it can be a little bit tricky when using it in attack mode. Now, to just put it back into its default mode, you just lift it up. If you want to go back into the defense mode, it's like that, and then stamina mode, it's just like that. And yes, you could just literally go straight from one to the other. You don't need to cycle through each one. Overall, though, High Extend plus Dash is a really, really, really good driver. It's fantastic. It's got a little bit of extra height. It's got a dash teeth mechanism, and then it's also got all of these mode changes, which can really help, and it's pretty wide as well. So I would say that this driver as a whole is fantastic for any type of Beyblade. Now we got the over disc. The over disc is basically like a zero disc from early on in the Beyblade Burst series, just a little bit wider, and it's also very similar to the other Dynamite Beyblade discs, where it's just like sticking out like this and then lowered down a bit. It's pretty heavy, and it's really, really good for that. This is fantastic for a Beyblade to keep its momentum up, keep weight distributed evenly throughout the entire Beyblade, and it's also great for balance as well. So this whole Beyblade is just perfectly circular, other than this little ridge right here, but that isn't gonna affect it too much. For the most part, it's perfectly circular, and this helps even with life after death or zombie combinations as well, which as a whole, this Beyblade does that very, very well due to, ironically, the bear trap gimmick, which we'll talk about a little bit. So this disc itself is fantastic for just about any Beyblade. Just keep in mind though, if you're going to use this with other generations for Beyblade Burst, it is going to look a little bit weird because it's, so high up. As an example, here's that Wyvern again from Super King. So if I just put it in here, that's how it's going to look. as opposed to being straight out downwards like how his actual one is supposed to be. So keep that in mind. It is, really good for defensive because it's very thick and it's also just perfectly round. I noticed that when the Beyblade is spinning, and then if it's losing its balance or anything, the opponent Beyblade will literally just be hitting this metal, and because it's so thick, heavy, and circular round, it's not going to be impacting this much, because it's going to send it around, but then it's just going to be picking up like rotation as it spins. So it can be very, very good for life after death or zombie, or however you want to call it. So this is just fantastic. It's literally just fantastic. So definitely recommend it for any type of combinations. Probably not for attack unless you want to do more heavy attacks, because some attack Beyblades are good for being light, so it can go faster. But some weight on attack Beyblades is good. So actually, never mind. Forget what I just said. This would actually be pretty good for attack as well. Just keep in mind, you might need to do a little bit of a stronger launch due to how heavy it's going to make the attacking layer be. And then we get to the final Beyblade itself, the final part, Greatest Raphael. So I had noticed that whenever it's spinning, doesn't matter how strong you launch it, the bear trap claws always come up. So you can spin it, and you could just go and pick it up, and the claws just shoot back up. So that can be annoying with every single match. At the end of every single match, you have to shut it down. But overall, it's fine. I don't mind it. Let me just quickly bring the traps up so that you can see what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, and just as an example of what I was just saying, I just launched it, and there we go. See, it always comes up. So when it's coming up, it can be prone to lose attack, balance, and then it just comes up. So when it comes back up, its center of gravity definitely focuses more down because there's more weight pushing down on it due to these claws being upwards. That helps in it keeping balance, and it helps, definitely bring the center weight down. So that can be good for some stamina combos. When it's like this, it's definitely better for attack. For defense, especially due to how circular it becomes. When it's like this, it's almost fully circle for the most part, which is perfect for defense Beyblades, and it just goes so great with this with the the over disc. So that's just fantastic, because this really shows how compatible it is for all types of Beyblades. Another note, when it's going up, it can actually cause some recoil to happen and send the other Beyblade going, away from it. But that doesn't happen too much, and it doesn't go up like shooting up. It goes up slowly over time. So keep in mind with that. As a whole, it has also metal burst stoppers, which is really cool. So that helps it a lot. And it's really hard to burst this Beyblade. I haven't really been able to. I think only once or twice. And this is what I meant. Every time it comes up, you always have to click it back into place. For the most part, this Beyblade as a whole is just really, really good. It's, these protrusions here are great for attack, especially when it's spinning a lot, because even though it's little, it just works. And there aren't that many, it still just works. But overall, I really recommend this Beyblade to everybody for any type of situation. This Beyblade is literally fantastic. So sorry I'm rushing this ending. I'm just running out of time right now on my camera. But I hope you guys found this video informative. Rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.